Hi everyone, I'm Robbie Jenkins, and this is Breaking Boundaries, a place where we take posing beyond the stage. And today I'm really excited because I have somebody on who really embodies what it means to be an artist. He film writes, he directs, he has not one but two films that's been in various film festivals throughout the world and also won various awards. He also paints and, of course, is a physique artist that I got the opportunity to collaborate with late last year. So without further ado, I want to introduce my friend, Peter Hartwig.
Hey, Robbie.
So,
Hey, what's going on? Um, first, first of all,
good morning, evening.
I was going to say, well, I love that intro. I'm gonna have to steal it and put it at the front of all my videos. I'm like, it just summed up a lot of really cool stuff. So, I'm like, yeah, awesome. Um,
Yeah, I was going through it in my head a little bit. I was like, I know everything I want to say about how to get it right. So I was like running through it a couple times before he got on. And I was like, all right, this, I think this stuff.
oh, cool, cool.
But
Yeah, I'm always like terrible with stuff like that when it's kind of just like, oh yeah, someone just asked me a question and I'm just talking candidly at the gym and I just explain it perfectly. Then it's just like, okay, cool, piece the camera, and I'm like, oh fuck, what's my name? Kind of just like I just fuck everything up. It's kind of just like I don't know. Maybe it's just a thing. Maybe I just need more practice. Um, I
is
should.
it just with talking though? Or is it other stuff too?
I think talking, singing, stuff where I got to use my voice. Mostly, yeah. Like stripping off and posing and flexing in front of people, I have no issue with that whatsoever. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm good to go. Like 24/7, just like already got these trunks on, tearaway pants ready. But it's just like, oh, I have to talk and introduce myself. It's just like I just sort of stutter and sort of fumble around. But it's interesting that I don't do that as much when I'm like acting, because I do, film acting and all that sort of stuff. When I put myself as like a character, it's kind of just like, oh, this character is assertive and he has to be doing this and this and this. It's almost just like there's a shield that can kind of carry you forward, and you're kind of just like, I'm a performer now. And I feel like that's why when people meet me in person after seeing like my routines and stuff like that, and I'm a little bit more socially awkward and a bit more shy than they expect me to be, they're kind of expecting something a bit more extravagant and a bit more out there compared to like what you would see in my routines and my performances. And then I'm just like, oh, like, I'm just weird. So I don't know.
I feel like that was the experience you had because I remember when we finally met in Florida, you had said something different, like something similar to that though, where you were like, "You're an introvert, aren't you?" I'm like, "Mm-hmm."
I
Like I would not have expected that.
I did not expect that at all. I yeah, probably like the exact same thing that we're experiencing is that it's just like when I see your routines, they're so assertive and so powerful, and they just project such intensity and confidence. And it's just like this, I don't know, magnetic energy that's just like, wow. And then it's just like, I kind of expect that when I met you in person, that you would be so much more intent and outgoing, that's kind of mirroring the routines. And it's like, nope, introvert. Yeah, so that's kind of cool.
Stop me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited because today we get to share one of your routines and some of the inspiration behind that, which is art that goes so much more beyond just bodybuilding and anything in the posing realm. But before we do that, just because there might be some people that listen to this and maybe they don't know a little bit of your background, could you give us a little bit of what your start in bodybuilding was and what caught your eye in posing and got you into that aspect?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so my name's Pete Hartwig. I started bodybuilding like really young. So when I was like about somewhere between 10 and 12, I probably started closer to 10. I remember like I was at school and I was hanging out with another friend, and he was like skinny but not muscly kind of thing, but he had a six pack just because he was skinny kind of thing. And the girls would always comment and talk about it and stuff like that. And it's just like I just wanted to be like shredded and buff and ripped, kind of like a He-Man sort of superhero type character kind of thing. And it probably, you know, a lot of this stuff probably stemmed from that insecurity back when I was like a kid. And I was just like, had this obsessive personality, and I was just like working out in my bedroom doing push-ups, and then I had like these like paint cans that I would try and use as dumbbells and stuff, and roping a box of encyclopedia books together and trying to lift that. I had no idea what I was doing sit-ups and stuff like that. And then I just started really getting into it. I got into calisthenics a bit as well because I liked gymnastics and things. So I learned how to do like flips and things like that. Not properly trained either, like just throw a mattress down in the
Yeah.
backyard and do it kind of thing. And then got into like doing calisthenics, and then at 14, you know, I really got into like weight training and stuff like that. Like, I think it was my 14th or 15th birthday. I got some dumbbells, a bench press, and a barbell kit. And I was just in there just training every day, probably overtraining, like, oh yeah, every body part every day. Like, and it was crazy. I just kind of built like a pretty decent physique just from that. And then yeah, I really got into it. After I finished high school, I went straight to uni, studied exercise physiology, and basically learned about nutrition, learned about training, strength and conditioning. And I took a lot of electives in sports psychology and nutrition, and also subjects in conditioning elite athletes, because I didn't really find it all overly interesting for like the musculoskeletal rehab, cardiac rehab, stuff like that. I'm like, no, I need to learn how to get jacked, get ripped, and all the like exciting stuff that I was really into. And then, yeah, just followed that along. And that's kind of what got me into bodybuilding, is like I was doing like some prac hours as part of that degree. And there were like a handful of guys getting ready for a competition. And they just assumed that I was as well, because I was like, you know, I was leaner than they were. They were like 8 weeks out from their show, and I was already like leaner. And they're like, "Oh, you're competing as well?" I'm like, "No, I have no idea like what's going on with this sort of stuff." And I'd never even been to a bodybuilding show. And they were just like, "Oh, well, you know, you got pretty good genetics. You look like you're in great shape. Maybe you could do it as well." And they're really supportive and encouraging. And I got referred to another coach who did my first prep in like, I think it was like 4 weeks, because it's like I was basically under eating. So I was just like training like a mofo, and like single digit body fat year round. And I was basically within striking distance of doing a show at any time without even really realizing it. And then it was just like, oh wow, you know, I'll prep you, do a show and stuff. And then I came third at state title in juniors in my first ever competition. And some of the feedback I got was just like, you're actually leaner than the guy who won, but like your posing was just fucking terrible, to put it in a very nice way. It was just like, if you had better posing, like you probably could have presented your physique a lot better and actually won the show. And that was kind of like a moment where I was just like, oh yeah, I'll look into this a little bit further and start learning how to do it properly and stuff like that. Because I probably had 2 or 3 posing lessons before my first show, and I was sort of standing awkwardly and holding myself in these weird sort of shapes and stuff. And I'll show you some photos and stuff of that too. But like, it was just like looking at that compared to the people who beat me, and I was just like, oh wow, I look so bad, I'm so uncoordinated, I need to fix this. And then I really started like getting into that. And then 2 weeks later, I competed in a different federation at the state show. I got a little bit leaner, a little bit sharper, and also fixed up my posing like massively. I just was obsessed. I was just practicing. I got to get good at this. And then I ended up winning that show. And then from there, I just started developing like a passion. I was like, this is actually art. This is entertainment. And that's something that had stemmed from other parts of my background as well. I'd done, you know, like theater and acting, and I'd loved storytelling and just being able to convey stuff like that, and finding like a platform such as bodybuilding, which kind of combines the two, like athleticism, strength, conditioning and everything, but then being able to have that artistic component. I kind of fell in love with that, particularly following like the golden era of bodybuilding, where it's just like, not just about let's get the biggest and leanest, freakiest looking dude. It's also like, let's present beautiful shapes and some art on stage and entertainment and the charisma that shows through. And that's the kind of thing that really drew me into it. That's how I got started.
It's awesome. It's so funny too, because I like that you talk about the beginnings and the fact that your first show, the judges were like, "Oh, you gotta fix that."
Yeah.
Because I think anybody that would see you now, like on Instagram, I mean, some of the people now that are on that are posing coaches, they used you as inspiration when they started. I know like Chris Barnett now, like he's getting huge with Iron Eden, but I remember when I first started posing, he was the one I think in his story had posted something about your ebook. And then I started talking to him about you, and he was like, "Yeah, I watched this and basically built my routine." I was like, "Oh, like okay." So then I bought that, and then I think it all like came full circle because it's probably like 8 months after that when I think you and I finally connected, and then I think when we all did like that group project, and then Chris was like, "Oh my gosh, you brought in Pete! Like, how did that happen?" So it makes me laugh. It's good for everybody to know that like we don't just pop out of the womb knowing how to pose. Like, however awkward and like blocky or just weird shape you are when you start, it's like that's what we all look like.
It's yeah, it's so true. And I sometimes I have to repost old videos. I've got a routine that I did when I was like quite young, and I have to repost it. But it's almost like a little bit cringe. So I'm building myself up to posting it. But it's sometimes it's important to show that because when I have people come into the studio to learn stuff, sometimes they'll throw out like these excuses like, "Oh, I'm not a natural dancer. I can't really do this, and I've never really had a background in this." And it's just like I can see that they're already better than where I was when I started. So I came from a worse place than that because I'm like, but they don't understand how uncoordinated and how bad I was when I did that first posing session when I was like 20 years old. It's just like, oh, and so using that sometimes can inspire people because I think we had a conversation like this when we were traveling together about like, I don't like to post a lot of my failures and a lot of my upcoming things, but those are the things that people actually relate to more because that they see themselves. If they only see your highlight reel, they just think I'll never be able to get to that because he's like born with it and he has this immaculate talent and all this sort of stuff and just not there. And it's just like that's just a fake perception because I'm only posting the stuff that like, but by the time anyone sees it, I've already put like 1,000 hours worth of work into it. And it's just like, I've got it to this level and that's what I've curated and I've fucking edited that too. So even that 10 takes and I've taken the best one and I've sort of chopped it and put it together and be like, aha, look at this kind of thing. And it's kind of
Yeah.
just like, you don't get to see all the garbage and the failures and everything in the lead up to that. And so I'm slowly working my way up to posting more of that kind of stuff, despite like how cringe some of it can look.
And which I think for you too, because of where you're at in the sport and what you're known for, I think that really will. That won't be one of those things where people are like, "Oh, that's horrible. Why are they posting that?" It's gonna be more like, "Oh, like holy cow, like this guy, like he started where I feel like I am right now." And then he was able to turn like that into where he's at now. So, okay, maybe this seems a little bit more realistic. And that was one of the things I'm really glad about when it comes to my Instagram is when I started posing and I was just posing in my studio because I was too scared to pose in public. I would put that stuff on Instagram. So like the people that have been following me for a while, they see where I'm at now, but they saw where it started and it wasn't when I had a bunch of good stuff first. And then I was like, "Oh, hey, I didn't used to be." It was like they watched the cringe like throughout the whole entire time to where like, "Oh, this is looking like something," to, "Oh crap, like she actually got pretty decent at this." Um, and I'm so glad that I did that now looking back because
Yeah,
of the same thing. Like if people send me that stuff, I'm like, scroll down 2 years. 2 years. Now I put in thousands of hours probably in that 2 years, but scroll back 2 years and see where I was. Tell me how bad you look. Like
yeah. That kind of
we all start there.
that was something I realized about you as well. It's kind of like almost was like a pleasant sort of surprise where I just almost kind of assumed that you had this kind of natural talent for it as well, and that you'd been doing it longer than you'd been doing it for. Because when it was just like, oh wow, you've only been doing this for 2 years, like you just must pick things up like very quickly, kind of thing. But then it's just like after hanging out together and seeing how passionate you are and how much work you put in with stuff, it's just like doing it over and over again and beating yourself up and then going back to the drawing board and doing it again and stuff like that. It's just like, oh wow, this is the same process. This is what I'm going through. This is everything. But it's kind of, it's so interesting that we're going through the same thing, and I already know that about myself, and I still kind of looked at you and sort of assumed that you'd kind of like, oh, you just kind of picked this up a little bit easier because it took me a lot more years. But the amount of work that you've crammed into those years is like insane.
That's what I was talking to a guy earlier, and I was like, the thing is, people, they think about practices when they were physically doing it. And I was like, when I first started, if I was too scared to physically do it, I was watching it. And then I was thinking about it in my head. And then when I started to learn how to move a little bit, every drive to work, 30 to 45 minutes, I was playing music. Probably not the safest thing, but I would start posing in my head on the drive to work. In between breaks, I was listening to music. So it was like I wasn't even just getting reps in physically, but I mean, I even had drives home that were 8 to 10 hours long, and I would almost pose in my head that entire drive. So like you're talking hours
Wow.
and hours of like just mental imagery and picturing hitting a certain pose or how something looks. And I still use that now. I swear by it. I swear like the reason that I got as good as fast as I did was because I would mentally allow myself to practice even if I physically couldn't or wouldn't for whatever reason. Um,
It makes such a
and then it just made
difference.
everything click. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I still think my favorite, hands down, my favorite part of the trip out to Australia was when we collaborated at the end. And like
Me too.
we were both frustrated and both blocked. And it was so funny because you were working on your routine. I think it was your advanced routine, and you were just going through stuff. And the perspective on it, because I'm watching you, and when I'm watching you, it's like I'm watching a guy that's been doing this for years and is passionate about it and is just he's a pro at it. So I'm watching what you're doing, and to me, everything I'm watching you do looks really, really good. And then I remember you looked over at me and saw I had my phone out and was recording, and you got so mad at me.
Yeah, I was not happy. I was just like, why are you filming me? I'm stumbling over myself. I can't think of ideas. It's just like, why are you filming the worst parts of me, kind of thing. And then that sort of sparked where we decided like, after that we started working together, and then you helped me build it, we put it together, and it just kind of was like, I think that's when we had that discussion of like, this is actually some of the gold nuggets that would be good to share with people, because it's just like, this is the creative process, this is what I'm going through. I'm frustrated and I've been working on this routine, I'm blocked, and it's just like I feel like I've just, you know, spent a lot of time and got nowhere, kind of thing. And it's just like, oh, I'll try this spin. No, that doesn't fit. This doesn't work, kind of thing. But then when we finally connected and started to build that, it was like, wow, this is like, these are two of the most epic routines that I've been a part of. Particularly the duet that we did. That was like insane.
Yeah. Yeah, that was awesome. And I think it was because we finally I think we finally just talked. I think we were both kind of blocked and struggling a little bit, and then we were both introverted and we're both tired. And um so when we finally just opened up and you were like, man, this is how I'm feeling right now. And I was like, yeah, I mean, me too, honestly. And then like we talked through it, and then you finally just go, well, shall we do this? And I was just like, yeah, I suppose so. And then it was magic after that.
Yeah, it's
So,
and how quickly it came together as well. Like sometimes it takes me
yeah.
a lot longer to pair that together, but then with the collaborative effort, and then also like the dynamic of posing with two people is so different to one. But having it work together, it was just like fuck, it felt like some magical fucking spiritual energy or something. It was just like, what the hell did this? It just kind of came together. Like, where did this come from? It was weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I think my favorite video shot of it was when we got done at the end. I think it was like one of our first full run throughs that we did. And I think we had like maybe one or two tweaks left to do, but we both got done and we both pulled our arms up at the same time and we're looking into the mirror. And you see the look on your face as you realize, like, that was really cool. And then you just see me go, oh, like we just knew. We knew it was good.
Yeah.
Like, really, really good. So, yeah, I don't know. I just always feel like two heads are better than one. And then I think when you get two people that have like a decent understanding of posing and just kind of the concepts with it, and especially because our styles are so different, it just works. It works so well. Like, we were open-minded enough to step out of our own styles, because there were some moves in there that was more of like your classic golden era stuff, and I followed you. And then there were times that you would get stuck, but I would hear a beat or a percussion, something or other, that you would miss. And I'd be like, oh, this would be cool.
Yeah.
And then you were open and willing to walk into that.
It was really cool because I wasn't sure how we'd mesh, because we both love this craft, but our styles are so different. And it's kind of like the merging of the yin and yang, and it actually really worked together. And then it was also, I think we were talking about this too, about how and about posing in general, about like a lot of routines that we create kind of reflect what's going on internally at that time. And that routine was a very good summary of our I guess adventures up into that point with it was really cool.
Yeah, and we've really played on that too, because there's a lot of stuff in it where we're coming together and pulling apart, and it's like that was like the whole trip. It was like, all right, we're both kind of starting to open up, and then one or the other or both would just be like, no, we need some more space. So it was fun. It was fun how we used that. And then when we finally started playing, I think that was my favorite part, because I threw in my little contemporary dance move transition thing. And then I think as soon as I did that, then you got super playful and you're like, oh, I wonder if I can still do my backflip.
Yeah. And then, oh my God. And that's why in like those rehearsal videos, everyone's asking like, Pete, why are you wearing shoes? And I'm like, because doing backflips on concrete in bare feet is fucking painful. That's probably how I fucked my knee, to be honest. It's like, oh well. I honestly think I fucked my knee doing like, like when we filmed all that content for the posing course that I'm doing. It's just like on the second day, I did like about 3 hours straight of like side lunging posing. Just like, here's a side lunge bicep pose. Here's a side lunge lat spread pose. Here's a side lunge scorpion pose. Here's this and this and this. It was just like down in that position, and then I'm just like, oh yeah, no wonder I'll have to go get a scan on it, to be honest. But I mean, other than that, it was epic. And then like, coming back to that routine, like, adding in like those dance moves combined with like the backflip, and then kind of merging that together. And it took us a few goes to get that proper sync, but when it came together, it was just like epic. I'm looking forward to the edit of that too, because I'd love to add in like some little pops and sound effects, like when you do that move and I push into the backflip, kind of like having some sort of accent accentuated in the music, or adding in a little bit of sound effects like an explosion and stuff. So it's like a full like theatrical piece. I think that stuff's really cool.
Yeah, that would be super cool. I think the favorite part was when we ran through it. I think it was our practice one. We ran through it, and I think only one of the guys had seen it, right? It was like one or two of them, but like half of them hadn't even seen it yet. And I remember when we got done and we like looked up at them, they were like, what was that? Like, holy shit.
That just blew everyone away. Like putting that together, and the fact that like we pretty much choreoed that and polished it in, it was about 3 or 4. We worked it out. It was like 2-3 hour sessions or something. So it was just like that came together like that, and it was just insane. We're gonna have to
Yeah.
post. We're gonna have to post that. I'm gonna have to go through and actually. This is good motivation for me to like. Okay, well now I have to actually fucking edit that footage. I have like over the last year, I have so much content that I've shot that like I probably don't have to film anything for another 5 years. I've so much posing content that it's just like I just stay in the editing suite and just have unlimited content for the next
Yeah.
so often. So obviously, I think that's always the way though. Like it's just like shooting and making the content is way more fun than sitting in the editing suite and like, oh my god, it took an hour to shoot. It's gonna take me like, I don't know, 4 hours to edit and put together and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I learned that with here, like all the interviews and stuff are really fun, but then I'll go to make like a 30-second to 1 minute clip somewhere in there, and I'm in here. It's like for every 30 seconds, I'm gonna have to give at least 30 minutes,
Yeah.
if not more. And I learned that really quick. And I'm like, man, this editing, now I understand what people are talking about because this thing is a big beast.
Yeah, it's so
And
much more work than what people think.
yeah. And I don't even go as crazy with it as you do. Like my stuff's still super basic and simple because I still don't really understand what I'm doing. So maybe that helps me a little bit because now I'm not overthinking things that I would if I had more knowledge of it. But
Yeah, it's like when
editing,
yeah, sometimes people are like, why don't you post more? And you're like, oh my god, because like how long it takes to edit stuff. But I guess like I mean, you could if I could post more if I did more raw stuff, kind of thing. But like
yeah,
with like with all that polished stuff, and I don't know, that's sort of like my jam too. I like, I don't know, I like quality more than volume. Some people are just volume people, but I don't know. Yeah.
yeah. I feel like I'm somewhere in between. It's like I don't want to put something out just to put it out.
Mm.
So like if I want to put something out, it's because I really want to put it out. But I don't quite get to the extreme. Like I get to a point where I'm like, all right, does this convey what I want it to convey? Yeah. Are there some things that I probably want to try to improve next time? Okay. I'm gonna take mental notes for next time. We're gonna give it a go. But I'm tired and I'm hungry and I want to go get something to eat. So I'm gonna post this and then we're gonna try to make it better next time.
Yeah.
And
I think
that's kind of what I've just
I think you've struck a really good balance with that too. And I'm sort of seeing that in your stuff and sort of drifting toward that way because like as you know, it's just like I can be a little bit of a procrastinator. Surprise. But it's not always like procrastination. Sometimes it's just like I'm just taking so long to get this done and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna re-edit this, I'm gonna add this in. By the time like I make something, so it's usually really good. But it just takes me such a long time to do it because I'm redoing this, going through every little piece, you know, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, making sure it's like perfect to the point where it's just like someone else who can be a lot more efficient than that can just, oh, I had this great idea and it's taken me so long to do it that other people have surpassed me with it because they're just like, fucking, oh yeah, this is good enough, throw it out there and stuff. So I think finding that balance is really important too. And I've started putting stuff out that's like a little bit more raw and not as polished and stuff. And surprisingly, it's actually because sometimes you can get caught up in the likes and the views and the algorithm and stuff like that. But some of that stuff connects and lands with people more because it's just like, oh, it's just Pete with his phone in the studio. He doesn't have like proper lighting set up. The audio is not the best and stuff like that. But it's just like the value of the content and there's a bit more personal
yeah.
connection. Whereas like I think when it's like overproduced, it looks better, it sounds better, the story flows better, everything's better except for the fact that you might have this little bit of a disconnect in connection because you don't feel like you're in the room with him. You feel like you're watching him on a screen, sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think that's something, I think that's just kind of part of what I've taken on because my goal with posing, especially once it got to a point where it became really therapeutic and I started realizing all of the positive benefits from it outside of competing and outside of the show, but just in creating things and learning and growing from it. Or even just sorting through some of my own like memories or whatever that I never wanted to like really bring up and actually sort through them. Um, I just got to a point where it's like I'd rather have the connection. So it's like I want quality over quantity, but I want connection over something. Like, I'd rather have connection over high quality. So like if I have to take that down to get this out there and that's going to connect with people better, then it's like, then that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely agree with that. It's so easy to get caught up in chasing a specific outcome, and then I think sometimes it hits you when you achieve that outcome, but without the kind of connection, you realize how empty it can be sometimes.
yeah. So I'm curious then, because I'm looking at a picture that I'm going to throw up here soon, but we're going to talk about a little bit about your archangel routine. But it's based off of an artwork piece that you made. So when you created this piece, do you feel like did you overthink things with it, or do you feel like when you were doing this painting, it was really free flowing?
I feel there was definitely a combination of both. When I crafted this painting, it's the painting is called Rise Above, and it's part of a series of paintings called Beneath the Soil. Just to give a bit of a background about what they're going to be seeing on the screen, I guess. And each of these paintings is like a chapter of my life where I've sort of learned something and I've turned it into a fable. And so there's like this free flowing element where I feel absolutely compelled to make this thing and I don't really know why. It's just like I just feel like I absolutely have to do it, and then I try and explain it to someone and almost no one gets it, but I have to go ahead with it because I'm just like, it's almost like a cathartic process of processing some internal stuff that I can't explain in another way. That's why I put it into art. And I feel like that's like, I guess, metaphor for a lot of artistic creation in general. But with that said, that's the free flowing element of it. And I'm like, okay, I'm envisioning this man, and there's like this demon, and it's like this demon has been following him around like his whole life, and torturing him, and it's just like, I'm just gonna have to kill that demon. And so he stabs the demon in the heart, but then he realizes that he's gonna die as well because the demon is part of him. And then above all of that is this giant archangel, and that is symbolic of the person that he needs to become to transcend him for his former self and be able to deal with all the shit that's underneath and rise above everything. And so I've written that poem that kind of captures this, and it's so each piece is like very symbolic of something I was going through in that particular part in my life. And this archangel piece here at the top called Rise Above is so similar to one of the bodybuilding routines that I've created, which is like my archangel routine. And so I was listening to this song, this album, Archangel, by this Norwegian band, Two Steps from Hell.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely amazing artists. And I just heard this song and it just had so much emotive power to it that I was like, oh my God, I have to pose to this. I don't know how, because it's a very intense orchestral music that's like not quite as slow as some of my previous routines where I can kind of flow and go into that golden era. And there's a few bits and pieces that have a bit more pop to it. But that routine and the movements that I put into that routine capture a lot of the stuff that I was going through at that time, where I felt really lost. I was quite depressed, and it's just like I want to find a way out and I don't know what I'm going to do. And it's just like that music to me is almost symbolic of this intenseness in taking a step forward, and courage and overcoming obstacles and those sorts of things. And I felt like for me that was a way for me to process things and kind of move through it, and put it into something. And I feel like that's how it kind of comes together with a lot of the best art, not just bodybuilding routines, but I think artistic creation in general, where it's just like there's a real personal connection and depth to it. It's not like, oh, this is a cool song and I can do a series of moves that fits to it, but it's like this is something really personal, and I'm telling that story on stage and people can see that.
Yeah, I love that. And when you sent me the video link for the routine. So I remember when we first had started, like when we had first started talking, um, I think I was looking at your YouTube and I found that routine. And when I saw that, and I think it was because it was so different in what I was used to seeing you pose to, or how I saw you pose, because it was a lot more powerful and intense. And then out of nowhere you throw in this backflip, and I remember the first time I watched it and I saw that, and then you landed basically into a whole nother pose that looked absolutely incredible. I was like, what, like, who is this person? And so when you sent it to me today, I had never even made the connection that that was connected to the art piece that I'd showed, which was just a combination of stories from just your own personal experience that you then just kind of tableted together to make one bigger photo, or bigger painting. And then knowing with like your films, because we talked about how you got a couple films out, and then one of them being Beneath the Soil. So I just realized today when you told me that, oh, that routine, which is my favorite routine that you've done, actually corresponds to this painting, which is what one of his films is about. I was like, it just blew my mind. And I'm like, this is so cool. So it's like when people think that posing is just a stage thing, it's like, no, it's artistic creativity. And now you can see a same story that's being expressed in three different modes, like three different modes of artistic creativity. Um, so I'm going to pull this routine up. I'm super excited about this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, and it's interesting. I haven't really shared a lot about this routine. I think there's also like this kind of internal conflict that, like, the more personal it is, the harder it is to share as well. But at the same time, it opens you up to that deeper connection. And so, not really having talked about the connection between the art piece and this, and what I was going through, and how the routine came together, but then all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, I got to find a piece to talk about for this podcast. Which routine am I going to choose? And I'm like, I haven't really done much on this one, and it's something I really, really am passionate about. And it's almost just like I've sort of subconsciously sort of just hidden it away, sort of expressed it a little bit, but haven't really gone into it as much. And then talking about it with you, and connecting with that, I'm like, oh wow, that's super cool. Yeah, I love being able to have like shared that with you, and have that connection. And it's just bizarre that it's just like that was the routine that I think you saw like maybe a snippet of like ages ago, and it's just turned out to be, oh, that, by the way, it's connected to this thing. So.
Yeah, it's connected to this art, which inspired this film. And this is your mode of telling it. So we've got the painting, and then we've got your film, but now to show how you can take posing and make it another way to present the same story. It's just every time.
It's crazy that like I've watched that like so many times, and this is sort of like delving into a little bit of that mentality that we were talking about earlier about like not wanting to show things that like they're not very good or I don't like or is like in the process of building or I perceive as failures. And I've looked at that before, like myself performing it, and thought, I could have done this better. I could have done that better. And I think this is okay. But like, and then withholding sharing that because of how critical I am of it. And then looking at it there and the response that it gets when I show it to people and stuff like that. And I'm like, it does kind of help ground me a little bit that it's just like, I don't know, like taking that sort of almost perfectionist temperament too far is like pathological and it just stops me from actually putting stuff out into the world. But looking at that now, I feel like one of the things that tells me that I'm changing and I'm growing and I am evolving is that I can look at that and feel proud of it and I feel grounded. I don't have to look at it and think, you know what, I should have had more pop on this pose. I didn't hit that right exact moment on this thing and stuff. I still notice little things like that, but I'm not like, they're not the main things. The overall feeling I get is like, wow, this is something that's really personal and I created it and I'm actually really proud of it. And I'm like, fuck, I'm going to post that. I'm going to put that out there.
Yes.
And yeah, it's like, it's really, yeah, something that, yeah, I'm really proud of that routine.
Should be. Like, I kid you not. I mean, I didn't even watch, it wasn't snippets of it. I think I watched it through a couple times. And then I remember, like I said, the
Oh, like
first time,
before this.
yes. So, like, before, I think maybe, so what, we had connected in January of 23, right? Yeah. So, beginning of last year.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And then we talked it out pretty much all throughout the year and then met up at the Olympia and then I came out to Australia. So it was probably March timeframe, sometime in there. Um, because I remember seeing your routine and I watched it once and then I was like, holy shit, like that was epic. And then I remember I watched it again. And then the part at the end where like you really start just like building up and going after it and just the like all of your other posing routines, they're phenomenal. They're so like smooth and very like they're very golden era. And then with this one, it was like you had something to say and you were gonna say it. And so the way that you hit everything was so much more powerful and every like, but it still didn't lose any of the grace in it either. Um, and then when you landed the backflip and you just landed it basically perfect on it, I was I was beside myself. I was like, what is this? And I t- I remember I took a clip like the last probably 20 seconds of that when like it's really building up or 30 seconds of it. I remember videotaping it and it was before Scott and I had got together. We were still friends and I sent that to him and I was like, is this for real? I was like, did you see what he just fucking pulled off? And he was like, even he was like, holy shit. Like, and he doesn't even get posing.
Yeah.
So
It's pretty crazy. That's one of the things that I love about what we do in like focusing more on the art of posing because I feel like that is something that can reach a much broader audience than say just the bodybuilding elements. Because there's a lot of people who they might look at like, you know, the open pros and stuff like that and just be like, oh wow, like, you know, I'm not interested in that kind of thing, to put it nicely. But then it's just like the posing element. I feel like has a much wider appeal to a more mainstream audience as well. It's
yeah.
just like anyone can connect to that.
And I think what's going to happen is I think that it's building. I think as we try to break it out to where it hits more of a mainstream audience, you're going to have people that want to keep bodybuilding like the very niche little thing that it is. But it's like you have to realize that if you want the sport to grow into something that not only just like evolves the sport and the quality of the sport, but if you want it to evolve into a spot to where you can have athletes that can compete as athletes and focus on being athletes. If you want more capability to, cover things so that way they can focus on their craft instead of this job and that job and the third job just to do the thing that they actually want to do. Like, you have to have that broad mainstream audience. Like, you have to have that entertainment. And I think some people will try to say that this is kind of what I see in my head is I think some people initially will fight that and they'll try to say, well, like, no, it's just taken away from the sport. People are doing it for attention. And it's being like, no, it's not. It's people are trying to get it to where we can share what we do and bring more other people in to understand why we're doing it. So it's not even about the attention, but like we're trying to get that connection and understanding back with like the rest of society.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then that'll open it up for just a lot more growth in general. Because it's so hard to fully commit to bodybuilding without kind of giving up so many other things in your life. But it's not at the level where it's just like, oh, you make it as like a football player, a baseball player, a basketball player, or any of these other things, and it's like, okay, cool, I get to do that thing. If you're like a top level pro, like you still got to have a job. Unless you're like number one in the world, you pretty much still have to have a job. And even then, like the prize money is not enough to really live off, kind of thing, for like everyone except for first place in open men's. Every other category basically doesn't.
Yeah.
But it's kind of just like if the sport were to grow, I agree. If to like a more mainstream audience and more people got involved with it, it'd be a win on multiple levels because it'd be like, oh, cool, we can like support these athletes, and then the quality of what they're producing would be better as well, because they can focus purely on that thing, and then also just like more people would connect to it, which is awesome.
Yeah, that was something that I had I've talked to like I think every podcast interview I've done now, we've hit this subject, and so far across the board everybody agrees. But it's the posing aspect, like the bodies bring a lot of awe, but it almost sometimes, because of where it's grown, we are on such a different level that you just don't even come across as human anymore in certain aspects of the sport. And so it just kind of like disconnects you back from normal society. And I think people can see that in like the day to day too. Like they could be out and about, somebody sees you and they're just like, oh, or like people are wowed by what they're seeing, but they can't connect to that aspect of you. But if you're able to tell a story, if you're able to go up and move in such a way and display emotion in such a way where it's like, even though I still have this, like this is my outer shell, now let me show you my inner shell, and it's just like yours. Like I still feel the same things, I still have the same emotions, I still go through the same hard things, I still have the same triumphs. Like we all do that together. It's like, well, then now you brought that connection back. You brought that out of this world physique back to being human. So
yeah, kind of blends them together in a way that they still can be wowed by, oh wow, this is crazy, but then also, oh, I can also connect to what this person is going through.
yeah.
Yeah. And I loved it, yeah. Like it's interesting, like bodybuilding as a sport is like so different to many other sports in the sense that like you have like your strength and conditioning component and then you have your skill component. And in most mainstream sports, it's like strength and conditioning is important, but if you can't do the skill, it doesn't really matter. It's just like, oh, you could be really strong, you could be really fast, but like if you don't understand the technical aspects of the game, it's just like you're not going to make it. Whereas bodybuilding, it's kind of just like it's sort of evolved to the point where it's just like you can absolutely nail the strength and conditioning component of it, and have very poor technical ability, which is like the posing component, and still do really well, kind of thing. So I think it would be amazing if that was like maybe accounted for in the judging criteria and things like that as well, where it's just like push people. Oh, okay, you can't be too lazy with this sort of stuff. And I feel like it is to a certain extent, and it has gotten better. I feel like over the last couple of years, the quality of posing has started to really improve. It's like there's this movement, and it's making a bit of difference. Particularly, you know, when all those athletes got, you know, criticized for having the bubble gut, and posing like they're riding a horse and stuff like that. And it's kind of just like, why don't they put any effort into their actual presentation on stage? It's just like they take all these drugs, spend all this time in the gym, and, you know, eat 7 meals a day and do all this sort of stuff, and then they don't fucking pose. It's just like, you know, I think like a lot of people were angry at the kind of the harsh criticisms and the backlash and stuff like that, but it's just like, no, if someone doesn't pull their stomach in, like, place them down the list, and then, you know, criticize them and stuff like that. Like, you're creating the demand of what we see in the sport by the feedback and what people want. So I think by overlooking that and not caring about it, I think damages the sport. And so it's good to see that, okay, cool, people who are putting effort into posing and doing really well are starting to make, and I think it's really good if someone at the top who has the best physique does that, because that trickles down, kind of thing. If you have a champion who's like lazy with their posing, then I feel like that has such a huge influence of the culture, because whoever is number one, people kind of follow that and move toward that. Sort of like with, I think, like Chris Bumstead, for example. And by the way, I think he's an amazing role model for the sport and everything, like listening to his interviews and all that sort of stuff with classic physique, but then in the opens and stuff like that as well. So I think it's starting to come back in a positive way. And then even with, say, in the competition just recently with Hardy busting out a couple of vacuums in the Arnolds, I was like, man, that's so good. Like, I thought, like, even just seeing his performance at when we watched it at the Olympia last year to the Arnolds just recently, I thought he's really leveled up since then. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I remember there was quite a few. Like, I can remember, I feel like that whole night was partially kind of a blur because there was like a mixture of watching the Olympia and then CBD gummies and food comas. Like, all of that was kind of.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember watching
Yeah.
Classic, and then I think I was like fading in and out of Open, but it was like every time I seemed to like start watching, somebody had a great routine. Because I remember you were sitting, I think, over at the table, and you would look at me and you were like, "Did you just see that?" That was actually not that bad. Like, that was pretty good. And I remember even
Yeah. I
us,
was blown away
yeah,
by Andrew Jack's routine. I remember watching it and be like, whoa,
yeah,
this is fucking fantastic.
yeah. So I remember that too, and like the little like resort room when we were striving, like where we were streaming it, and yeah, just even seeing that in the different shows where you're like it was starting to separate more too. It was like people were coming well prepared or they weren't, and then like you saw what that separation did, like as you watched person to person. So it was like if you watched a couple routines in a row that were really good, and then somebody came on that was like, like you didn't really care about their physique as much anymore. You're like, oh, so what? Like, that wasn't as impressive as I thought. Because now you just watched two other people that were insanely impressive, and they could move. They weren't locked up
Yeah.
and rigid.
Just
And
kind of having having that complete package. And I think that's the other thing that the way I see bodybuilding as well. It's very much an all-rounder sport.
Mhm.
It's all about balance and proportion. Like, everything has to be even. Like, you want to have your muscle groups balanced, but you also want to have the conditioning. You want to have the small waist, and you want to be able to present yourself really well. So if you can sort of balance all those aspects, you kind of can create something that's really awesome as an overall picture, even though you might not have every individual part. Like, there's always, when I look at my physique, my strong point is probably that balance and that all rounder. Like there's heaps of people who have a bigger chest, heaps of people with bigger quads, heaps of people with, like probably bigger shoulders and bigger arms and stuff like that. But it's kind of like the balance of that and combining the posing and everything together. And then those are the athletes that I'm drawn to as well, like that kind of completeness. And I feel like bringing the posing element up to be like in that mix more, and I think is really important.
Yeah, and I think it's fun on the amateur end too. Being able to be a part of influencing that on the amateur side of things, because like, what are the amateurs except for like the pros years from now? Like those that are amateur now, eventually some of us in the amateur leagues, like we're going to advance up to the pro league and then eventually to the Olympia. Like the people that are there now, give them a few years, maybe 2, maybe 5, maybe 10, depending on where they're at. And like they're going to be there. So it's like if they're already taking posing seriously as amateurs, when they already get to the pro show, now you've really got a whole upsweep of athletes that are like, yeah, this is what we're about. And it's not just going up and then throwing up in the most muscular. It's we'll throw one in, but it's going to come from this after it comes from this with a lot of different practice and care. And I get excited to see that. And I think with my amateur athletes that I'm working with now, I think what's been fun over the last couple of weeks is I've watched them get excited. It's I remember the girl that I'm working with right now, when we talked about the posing routine. At first, when she mentioned it, she talked about like throwing it together on her own before or whatever. And like she was excited to have me do her routine. But once we started practicing it, and then she started seeing the differences and then in how it made her felt. Every time she comes into practice now, she's more excited and more enthusiastic. And I think she came in today and she was just like, I get it. Like I completely look at posing completely different now. Like the way that I look at it or the way that I think about it has completely changed. And I think so many people are missing out on so much of what the sport can give because they're not putting into that aspect of it.
Yeah, and that's when you need people to shape the culture in that way, put stuff out that inspires people, and it's contagious too.
Yes.
Because like look at how much it has grown and starting to take off. Where it's just like a handful of years ago, there wasn't that many specific just posing coaches around, and like I used to tell people, oh yeah, I'm a posing coach, and I have to explain what it is and all this sort of stuff to people. And now it's like a little bit more, like still maybe not understood outside the bodybuilding community, but it's very well accepted sort of inside that. And there's lots of people who are really passionate about it, and it's sort of, yeah, I can see really, really great things happening.
Yeah. So I think before we get off here, so I don't want to go too long, even though I feel like when you and I get on the phone, we can just go down rabbit holes and stuff forever.
Yeah,
So we're gonna have to do this again. But
definitely, yeah.
what do you think if you could think of anything to really grow the posing community and to really inspire athletes to find like the inner artists and bring that out on stage? Like, what do you think are some of the things that we could do to help push that forward?
I think firstly making it more accessible to get information on how to do that, because I think there's different groups of people. There's like a group of people that are really passionate about it and want to do it, but they don't know how to tap into that, and they don't know how to turn that into something and say, how do I take what's in here and follow like a system where I could build that for myself and turn it into something and be at that level. I feel like making it more accessible and having content out there that teaches people how to do that, so that the people who want to do it can. And then there's like a group of people who I think they don't think that they could do it, or they don't feel like they'd want to do it. But I think if they actually went through that process and they found out and they sort of felt what this feels like and got shown how to do it, I feel like they would convert. And then there's probably a small group of people who are just never going to care about it and just like, stuff posing. Like, it's all about lifting and stuff like that. And I feel like, okay, they can just stay there. Eventually, I don't know, they should go into powerlifting or something. But I feel like just like for that, I think like a lot of it could be I'm sure there's like many solutions, but I think one of them is like the accessibility, because when I think back to when I wanted to start creating better routines and stuff like that, I'm like, I want to make something that inspires people, but I have no idea how to do that. And just like, I know I like this pose and this pose and this pose, and I like this music, but how do I coordinate that together? And just like, how do I make myself look better? So I think having groups and having communities and having where this stuff is encouraged and you feel part of something, because I feel like those are the elements in other sports that create like these giant followings. When you look at, say, like CrossFit or jiu-jitsu and things like that, they have these very large community elements to them.
Yeah, and I know we've even talked about kind of like the dance setup where they'll go into a studio for like a workshop and then they start to work on something, and then at the end it's like people get a display. But if you look at it, like, even if the dance choreography, a lot of it is similar, like you can see each individual person within it, like they find a way to move in it. It's not just like a mere carbon copy person to person.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I definitely, one day, I don't know when, but one day I'm going to make something like that happen. Mark my words, it's going to happen.
That sounds really cool.
Well, any last like little bit of advice or initial tips before we jump off here?
I would say the biggest tip is to take action, because one of the things I think that primarily holds people back is not taking action and not knowing what to do, taking that first step, whatever it is, accepting that it's probably going to be bad. You're going to put together a bad routine, a bad first draft, a bad whatever, and then you build upon that. Because that's probably one of the biggest barriers that holds me back in almost everything I'm trying to do. And something that I'm constantly encouraging myself to push through is just, particularly if you're very self-critical and you just like have to do it, accept the fact that it's not going to be perfect, and then just build upon it. That's the tip that I would give.
I love that. Well, Pete, thank you for giving me some of your time. And this concludes another episode of Breaking Boundaries.